The Garden Project. This is the story about a small town nestled between rolling hills and a nice flowing river. There was a community there known as the heart of the town. For years, this center had been a place where residents gathered to share resources, attend events, and support each other. The town was really proud of this place, yet over time, the center had fallen into a transactional routine. People came, they checked the boxes, they got what they needed, and left. Relationships were cordial, but only at that surface level, driven by their needs rather than their deeper connections. So the director of the center, Sarah, began to notice that while things were running smoothly, something was missing. Attendance was steady, but there was a lack of energy and spirit in the community. The events were more about the logistics than their shared experiences. People contributed when it benefited them, but the sense of collective purpose faded, just didn't exist. And one day, Sarah heard about a neighboring town that had transformed a barren lot into a thriving community garden. She was inspired by this idea and she thought, what if we create something like that? What if we make it more than just planting vegetables? What if this garden became a place where people can reconnect, not just with the earth, but we can reconnect with each other? So she decided to propose that idea at the next community meeting. And as expected, there was a lukewarm response. Some people agreed to help, but their questions were focused more on the practicalities. Well, what's in it for us? What are we going to get out of this? And another thing, how much time is this going to take? Wait a minute. Who's responsible for what? You know, it was clear that the people were viewing the project through a transactional lens. Yeah, they were willing to help, but only if they could see the immediate benefits or the clear outcomes for themselves. It was all about me. Okay, I should say all about them. Undeterred, Sarah gathered a small group of people who were genuinely interested, even if their reasons were mixed. They started small, clearing the weeds and prepping the soil. The work was slow and tedious, but Sarah insisted that they take the time to talk, to really share their stories and discuss their hopes for the garden. And slowly something began to shift. One afternoon, they were planting seedlings, and an elderly man named Mr. Lewis, who had been somewhat distant, started sharing stories about his childhood when his father taught him how to garden. His eyes lit up as he spoke, and the group would listen to him intently. They would ask questions. They were actually learning from his wisdom. And for the first time in years, Mr. Lewis felt seen, not just as a participant, but as a valued member of the community with something meaningful to share. It felt good to him. As the weeks passed, the garden began to grow, both in plant life and with the humans. This connection was just developing between them. This project attracted more people, but it wasn't just about getting the work done anymore. The garden became a place where people started to linger after the work was finished. Neighbors who had previously only nodded in passing were now sitting down together, talking about their lives, their dreams, and their struggles. There was real communication happening. Conversations went far beyond those usual exchanges about weather and daily routines. People started to genuinely care about one another. One evening, Sarah noticed a young mother named Elena, who often seemed stressed and withdrawn, staying behind after everybody had left. Sarah sat down beside her and just said, "Hey, how you doing?" At first, Elena hesitated, but then, as if a dam had broken inside, she started talking about how isolated she felt as a single mom, and she didn't have anybody to turn to for support. In that moment, Sarah realized that Elena had been participating in the garden out of obligation. She was doing her part to check off the list, but she hadn't found that deeper connection she truly needed. So Sarah listened without judgment, offering empathy and understanding. And she then asked the next group meeting if they could create a schedule to help Elena with her childcare. And instead of seeing it as an obligation, the group all embraced the opportunity to help her, to support her. This act of kindness deepened their bonds, making the community feel more like a family than a collection of individuals. By the end of the growing season, the garden had become more than a plot of vegetables. It was more like a sanctuary where relationships became transformed. People who once participated out of duty were now showing up out of genuine care and interest. That transactional mindset of what can I get out of this had shifted to, well, how can we grow together? How can I help you? The garden, once a simple idea just to beautify the town, had become a real living symbol of what happens when people invest in relationships rather than transactions. One day, as the community gathered for their harvest celebration, Mr. Lewis stood up holding a ripe tomato in his hand. With a voice filled with emotion, he said, this garden isn't just about food. It's about feeding our hearts. We've learned to really see each other differently, to give without expecting something in return, and to be there for each other, not because we have to, but because we want to. The crowd just nodded in agreement. They knew that something profound had shifted. This garden project was a success, not because of the vegetables they had grown, but because the community they cultivated amongst themselves. They made a pivot from transactional relationships to transformational ones. And their lives were so much richer for it. Wouldn't you agree?